Something is happening in Berea, Ohio. Something that nobody has officially announced. No press conference. No headline. No tweet from the front office. But if you've been paying attention, and I mean really paying attention, you can feel it. You can see it in the practice reps. You can see it in the body language. You can see it in who's putting in the work when the cameras aren't rolling. And who isn't even there. The Cleveland Browns walked into this offseason with one of the most talked about quarterback situations in the entire NFL. And right now, it is getting wild. Because what's unfolding in that facility isn't just a quarterback competition. It's a power shift, a changing of the guard, a story that the league isn't ready to fully admit yet, but it's already happening whether they want to admit it or not. And at the center of it all, two names, Shedeur Sanders and Dylan Gabriel. Let's start with what we know. The Browns selected Shedeur Sanders in the 2025 NFL Draft, a moment that sent shockwaves through the fanbase. Love it or hate it, you had an opinion. And from the minute he walked into that building, Shedeur came in with something that you simply cannot teach. He came in with presence, with confidence, with the kind of energy that makes other people in the room pay attention whether they want to or not. Now, I'm not saying Shedeur Sanders is a finished product. Nobody is saying that. He's a rookie. He's learning an NFL system. He's adjusting to a speed of play that is completely different from anything he saw in college. There are going to be growing pains. There are going to be mistakes. That is not the story here. The story here is what happens when you put in the work every single day and the guy you're supposedly competing with doesn't show up the same way. Because here's where things start to get interesting. Here's where the mystery starts to thicken. Dylan Gabriel, the other name in this quarterback room. The guy who was supposed to be the veteran presence, the steady hand, the bridge, or maybe even the starter. Depending on who you ask, Dylan Gabriel was supposed to bring competition to this room. He was supposed to push Shedeur, make things difficult, create real uncertainty about who this franchise was going to hand the future to. But something has been off. And when I say off, I don't mean his arm talent. I don't mean his reads. I'm talking about something more fundamental than that. I'm talking about availability. I'm talking about presence. Because there have been reports, there have been whispers coming out of OTAs and minicamp, and the word that keeps coming up when people talk about Dylan Gabriel is absent. Now, absence in football means different things at different times. Sometimes guys miss time for legitimate reasons. Injuries happen. Life happens. Nobody's here to judge a man for that. But when you're in the middle of one of the most important quarterback battles of the offseason, when the entire fanbase is watching, when the coaching staff is evaluating every single rep, absence means something. Absence sends a message, whether you intend it to or not. And while Dylan Gabriel has been away from that facility, Shedeur Sanders has been grinding. Let me paint you a picture. You've got Shedeur Sanders out there every day building chemistry with the receivers, learning the offense, getting reps, throwing routes, talking to coaches, asking questions, doing the things that rookies who want to start do. He is treating this like his job is on the line because it is. He knows this. He gets it. And then there's the other side of this coin. The guy who should be pushing him, who should be making him uncomfortable, who should be forcing the coaching staff to have real conversations every single week about who gets the first team reps. That guy has been nowhere near the level of presence that this situation demands. And people around the league are starting to take notice. Some people look at this and say, look, it's a long off-season. OTA attendance isn't mandatory. Guys miss time. It doesn't mean anything. Let's wait until training camp. Let's wait until preseason. And then we'll have a real answer about who this quarterback competition actually belongs to. But others, and this is where it gets uncomfortable, others are starting to ask a different question. A darker question. And the question is this: is Dylan Gabriel actually trying to win this job? Because here's the thing about quarterback competitions. They don't just live in the playbook. They don't just live in the pocket. They live in the building. They live in the meeting rooms. They live in the early mornings before practice starts and the late nights after everyone else has gone home. The guy who wins a quarterback battle isn't always the guy with the strongest arm. He's the guy who makes the coaching staff feel like he is the answer, like he is the one we can build around, like he is the future. And right now, based on everything coming out of Berea, that guy is Shedeur Sanders. But here's what nobody wants to say out loud because it would be a massive accusation, and I want to be careful here. There are people around this team who are starting to wonder whether Dylan Gabriel's absence is something more than just bad timing. There are people who are whispering that maybe Gabriel already knows how this ends. That maybe the whole thing feels like a foregone conclusion to him. That maybe he doesn't see a path forward in Cleveland, and the effort or lack of it reflects that. Now, is that fair? Is that accurate? I don't know, and I won't pretend to know. But I'll tell you this, perception in professional football is everything. And the perception building around Dylan Gabriel right now is not a good one. And then there's the third figure in this room. The one who's always in the background of this story, whether we bring his name up or not. Deshaun Watson. You remember him, right? The guy who was supposed to be the franchise savior? The $230 million guaranteed man? The guy who sat on the sideline for 2 full seasons while the Browns bled out around him? Deshaun Watson is technically still on this roster. He is technically still a presence in that building. But come on. We all know what this is. The Deshaun Watson era in Cleveland is over in every way that matters. His authority in that room has faded. His presence is a footnote now, a very expensive, very complicated footnote, but a footnote nonetheless. And what's interesting about Watson being there is what it represents. Because Watson spent years as the guy who this franchise had staked everything on. The guy the organization protected. The guy they built around. And look how that ended. Look at where the Browns are now. That's the cautionary tale hanging over this entire situation. That is the ghost in the room every time Kevin Stefanski looks at a quarterback and asks himself, is this the one?
The Browns cannot afford to get it wrong again. They simply cannot. This fanbase has been through too much. This city has been through too much. And that pressure, that enormous, suffocating weight of expectation and desperation, is falling squarely on the shoulders of the 2 young quarterbacks trying to prove themselves right now. And Shedeur Sanders? He seems to thrive under that pressure. That's the thing that nobody who doubted this pick wants to acknowledge. This kid was raised in a football environment unlike any other. His father is Dylan Sanders, one of the most competitive, most intense, most psychologically demanding coaches in college football. You don't come out of that environment soft. You don't come out of that environment fragile. You come out of that environment knowing exactly who you are, knowing exactly what you want, and knowing that the work is the only thing that matters. Shedeur Sanders walks into that facility every day and acts like the job is already his, not because of arrogance, but because of belief. And that belief is contagious. Players feed off that. Coaches notice that. The energy of a quarterback room changes when the guy running the offense carries himself like a leader. The fans are starting to feel it too. The Browns faithful, as long-suffering as any fan base in this entire league, are starting to let themselves feel something they haven't felt in a long, long time around a quarterback. They're starting to feel hope. They're starting to whisper things like, this might be the one. And after everything this city has been through, after all the false dawns and broken promises and wasted draft picks, that is not a small thing. That is enormous. But the doubt still lingers. Because this is Cleveland. And in Cleveland, you've learned to protect your heart. You've learned to wait before you celebrate. You've learned that things that look like breakthroughs sometimes turn into heartbreaks. So the question that the skeptics are asking is, what happens when the real competition starts? What happens when training camp opens and the pads go on and the hits are real and the pressure is real and it's not OTAs anymore? What happens when Dylan Gabriel, if he shows up, decides he actually wants to compete? What happens if Shedeur struggles adjusting to NFL speed in live game situations? Is this takeover real? Or is it an illusion built on early impressions and absence? And that's the thing that makes this story so compelling. That's what makes this entire off-season narrative so impossible to look away from. Because we don't have the answer yet. The coaching staff hasn't said anything definitive. The front office is staying quiet. Nobody is officially crowning Shedeur Sanders. Nobody is officially writing off Dylan Gabriel. Everything is still technically open. But the evidence is stacking up. The presence is there on one side and not the other. The effort is visible on one side and not the other. The belief, the hunger, is undeniable on one side and deeply, deeply questionable on the other. The takeover has already happened. Shedeur Sanders has already won the hearts and minds of this building. He has already established himself as the guy who wants it more. The guy who shows up. The guy who puts in the work when nobody is watching. Nobody has officially said it yet. But they don't have to. Because in football, just like in life, the title doesn't make you the leader. The work does. And right now, in Berea, Ohio, only one quarterback is doing the work. So here's the question I'll leave you with, and I want to hear what you think in the comments. Is Dylan Gabriel still a legitimate competitor in this quarterback race? Or is he already done, and does he even know it? Drop your thoughts below. Like the video if you think Shedeur Sanders is the future of this franchise. And as always, this is Brown's Breakout. Stay locked in, because this story is far from over.